I don't even know where to start with this. In the run up to an election, in the US and in some other countries, debates are common. In the US, it's pretty much expected, although it seems to be changing a little bit. Trump managed to get out of debating in the primaries. I don't know how, but he got away with it and he won. Then originally for this election season, there were two debates scheduled between Trump and Biden, which is fewer than the usual, at least three that we've gotten used to in the past few decades. Then Biden, of course, performs the way he did in that historical first debate and has to drop out. And yesterday we had what appears to be the only debate we're going to get in this election season between the Democratic nominee, Vice President Kamala Harris, and the Republican nominee, former President Donald Trump. Harris said last night that she wants another one, probably in part because she won the first one. And Trump said that I saw him on Sean Hannity saying, "We'll see." I take "we'll see" to mean no. He said, "We'll see. Why should I debate if I already won this one?" Which of course is how Trump sees it with debates, as with elections. He wins or it's rigged. All right, we're gonna play a few clips. We're gonna talk about them, and should we go straight into it? I can introduce you as we go along, but it is we're not gonna make it through all the debate, obviously, because the debate itself was twice as long as this show. But let's get to the first clip, Daniel.
Drill down on something you both brought up. The vice president brought up your tariffs. You responded, and let's drill down on this, because your plan is what she calls is essentially a national sales tax. Your proposal calls for tariffs, as you pointed out here, on foreign imports across the board. You recently said that you might double your plan, imposing tariffs up to 20% on goods coming into this country. As you know, many economists say that with tariffs at that level, costs are then passed on to the consumer. Vice President Harris has argued it'll mean higher prices on gas, food, clothing, medication, arguing it costs the typical family nearly $4,000 a year. Do you believe Americans can afford higher prices because of tariffs?
They're not going to have higher prices. What's going to have and who's going to have higher prices is China and all of the countries that have been ripping us off for years. I was the only president ever. China was paying us hundreds of billions of dollars, and so were other countries. And, if she doesn't like them, they should have gone out and they should have immediately cut the tariffs. But those tariffs are there 3.5 years now under their administration. We are going to take in billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars. I had no inflation, virtually no inflation. They had the highest inflation perhaps in the history of our country, because I've never seen a worse period of time. People can't go out and buy cereal or bacon or eggs or anything else. The people of our country are absolutely dying with what they've done. They've destroyed the economy. And all you have to do is look at a poll. The polls say 80 and 85 and even 90% that the Trump economy was great, that their economy was terrible.
Vice President Harris, I do want to ask for your response, and you heard what the president said there.
We want to quickly get in on that?
Sure. Yeah. Jonathan, of course, you are, a financial we a hedge fund manager. Can you explain us? By the way, we can't see you. But
sorry. Yeah.
Do you want to basically give us your analysis? Is Trump correct? Is China paying the tariffs that he imposes on them?
I mean, I'll start by saying I actually don't think that to be a good debater is that important. I don't think necessarily it's a skill that one has to have to be a good leader or a good president. But it is an opportunity to show some of what your ideas are. I mean, we know that it's ideas that move the culture, it's ideas that move a society. But, this idea, for one thing, that tariffs are paid by other countries, it's obviously factually wrong. When the U.S. enacts tariffs on China, Americans pay those tariffs, those taxes. So what always has frustrated me even more about Trump, however, is he sees trade as one country ripping off another. You hear that very frequently with trade. Well, we're getting ripped off on trade. And as someone who makes his living on trade, and I believe I understand a little bit of what Ms. Rand wrote about trade, it's just the exact opposite. So this whole line of Trump's in particular always really frustrates me. This notion that, trade is zero sum, or that, wealth is zero sum, and that someone wins and someone loses in trade.
Mark, of the four people on this panel, you're one of the two who will actually have, well, not have to, but have the choice of voting for one of these two lowlifes, or one of the other lowlifes who weren't on that debate stage. I think the best ad for either of them is to listen to somebody like Jill Stein talking. But yeah, did either of them convince you in that debate to vote for them?
No, I'm still abstaining. I just wanted to go off of what Jonathan said. Debate skills don't necessarily make for a good leader. You could arguably say that George Washington was the least articulate person of his generation and probably the best president we've ever had. He might not have been a very powerful debater, but he certainly was shrewd enough to lead the country in the right ways. It's one thing to hold China accountable for a fraud and IP theft, which they are guilty of. That would be one way of holding China accountable and making them pay their, I hate to use a term that everybody uses incorrectly, fair share. But it is insanity to think that a tariff does not in some way penalize the citizens of the United States. It makes their lives more expensive. It's not going to gain America any more revenue. It's going to steal revenue from people who have now no choices or more limited choices with respect to the things that they have to buy. And one of the things that really bothers me about the political language about economics is it's always about dominating. It's always about dominating the other country. We need to be dominant. Well, you can be dominant without using the force of government. The best way to be dominant is to be number one, the freest country in the world. So you shouldn't say we want to be the most dominant. You should say we want to be the most free. The freest country in the world will, by virtue of the fact of being free, be the most economically dominant.
And Mark, I'll quickly just jump in, and Jonathan, you as well, but like whipped into Trump's whole thing here is this nationalist, buy American. Everything has to be made here, made by Americans, created by Americans, grown by Americans. And I'll do a quick plug in a new textbook of Americanism. Harry Binswanger has, I believe, a seminal essay, Why Buy American is Un-American. So I'm offended by the idea that anyone thinks that he or she is going to tell me where I can spend the money that I've earned, already paid taxes on. So that to me is offensive. I think trade is such a wholehearted part of freedom, being an American, Americanism, that I'm really offended by that notion of one man is going to dictate basically where and how you can shop.
Jonathan, you, much like me, have the luxury of not having to vote or not voting in this election. But yeah, your thoughts on what we just heard in that first clip.
I find it very surprising, given that somebody was supposedly an established businessman, have such a childish understanding of trade. Makes me wonder if he was really a successful business, because how could you possibly cut so many deals, is the big deal maker, and not understand that a deal is a win-win type of situation, exactly as trade is. And it also strikes me as appeal to ignorance, appeal to the stupid people, the economic illiterate people who just think that it's a zero-sum world. So it strikes me as cynical, and yeah, appeal for the worst. And yeah, I agree with what you guys said about the nationalism aspects. It's disgusting.
Yeah, I mean, how many of those deals that he cut as a businessman were deals with politicians, and how many were actually
politicians, mobsters? Let's not forget he's a real estate mogul in New York, and there's probably no more corrupt market in the world.
Yeah.
Well, and I like your point, Mark, too, about this idea, domination. It's like, it's win-win-win-win relationships, free trade. And just, we forget, well, I don't want to take up too much time, but, a lot was said about trade and none of it particularly open to free trade. It kind of what infuriates me is that this is a supposed defender of capitalism, right? We know it's not Kamala. We know it's not the Democrats. So as objectivists, we're thinking, all right, well, this is our chance to speak up for trade, and it's to trade.
And ironically, Kamala is on the right side of the argument this time, and it's a little discouraging given the fact that she thinks the way to bring down prices and to make an opportunity economy is to price control or to otherwise centrally command control the economy. One of the worst bromides that came out of her mouth, which I'm sure we're going to deal with at some point in this discussion, is her opportunity economy. We need to talk about what that actually means for a politician and what that actually means for the people on the ground who are going to be subject to the opportunity economy.
Thank you, Bonnie, for the super chat. Yeah, by the way, I think the last time, well, actually, no, I'm pretty sure the last time we did a show about a debate that Kamala was a part of was the vice presidential debate in 2020. That was me and Raka. That was a show that was criticized, rightfully so, because we were mostly talking about Kamala as a person and how annoyed I was by her, everything about her, and we didn't talk much about substance. I will attempt to not do that today. Luckily, Trump was there, so he was, more, there's more to criticize in him than there was in Mike Pence in that debate. And about halfway through this show, I will tag out, and Daniel will replace me. So even if I do get into that, it won't be the whole show. Jonathan, you have something to say before
let's hit Kamala now. Let's hear from the vice president.
Because the Biden administration did keep a number of the Trump tariffs in place. So how do you respond?
Well, let's be clear that the Trump administration resulted in a trade deficit, one of the highest we've ever seen in the history of America. He invited trade wars. You want to talk about his deal with China? What he ended up doing is, under Donald Trump's presidency, he ended up selling American chips to China to help them improve and modernize their military, basically sold us out, when a policy about China should be in making sure the United States of America wins the competition for the 21st century, which means focusing on the details of what that requires, focusing on relationships with our allies, focusing on investing in American-based technology so that we win the race on AI, on quantum computing, focusing on what we need to do to support America's workforce so that we don't end up having on the short end of the stick in terms of workers' rights. But what Donald Trump did, let's talk about this.
Can you say that was a whole big bunch of blabber with absolutely nothing, right?
Well, there were some things in there that I think were worth looking at, but for the most part, it was bloviating. I mean, the whole concept of a trade deficit is meaningless. It is absolutely a meaningless concept. It's a political concept that's supposed to make us feel insecure, as if a trade surplus, as in taking in more than we're exporting, is somehow a virtue, when it isn't. A trade deficit doesn't make us poorer at all. In fact, it could make us quite rich. It's the trade deficit phenomenon that people are ignorant about that enables stupid-ass politicians like this to claim that tariffs will actually be good for us. As far as the trade wars that happened as a result of the tariffs, that was in fact a thing. I mean, that did in fact affect the economy, and that is the effect of putting onerous tariffs on other countries. They tend to retaliate with tariffs of their own, and of course the elite politicians don't suffer from this. It's us on the ground who can't get goods and services cheaply anymore. That makes them less accessible to us. But this idea of focusing on American-based stuff, again, is another appeal to nationalism that the left is turning to that is absolutely ridiculous. Now, it's one thing to farm out military equipment to be made by one of our enemies, and a country that has no interest in our continued existence. It's another thing to act as if we have to be a completely self-sustained country and not rely on any other country to trade with. That's stupid. That's that whole concept of dominating in a physical, warlike, nationalistic sense that does not represent an actual free market economy. So we don't have to dominate anybody. We can outsource these kinds of things to lots of other free countries. It shouldn't be China, of course. I think we should have, I think we should be much more circumspect about how we trade and how we interact with China, because they don't have our interests at heart. They are an enemy. I think they're weaker than everybody says they are. I think they're not capable of doing the things that people say they're capable of doing, but we still shouldn't encourage them or in any way support their regime by trading with them.
She at no point makes any connection between individual freedom, economic freedom, with accomplishing any of these goals, which, again, there's that zero-sum thinking. We've got to win the race, we've got to win the competition, or we're on the short end of the stick. And Jonathan, you said from the top, trade is win-win. Like both parties are better off at the end of a trade. That's why they engage in it. And Harris seems to, it's like the same thing. There's both this fear of trade, must be controlled, must be smart. She's got that same, zero-sum mentality.
Well, anything the government.
If I may add,
yeah.
I want to speak about the style of her speaking also. I think is an important point why she, in my opinion, won the debate. She's much more charismatic than Trump, and she presents a positive vision, regardless of how meaningless the actual content. But she does have a positive vision for the future, and Trump completely lacks that. He only says how awful the other side is without actually providing any content, any nothing to unite around. And Harris, she always goes back to this point of let's build something together, and that is much more appealing, I think, to a general public. And I wish there was a leader with an actual content who would have said that. But in terms of her charisma, her rhetoric, I think she's far superior to Trump. Stylistically.
Well, I have to say she still annoys me. I know, yeah.
I wanted to make a distinction there because I don't find her charismatic at all. What I find her is a relatively organized and semi-articulate person. Trump has charisma, but he's not an organized thinker. And when he talks, he talks in circles, and it's annoying. And he's such a malignant narcissist. He cannot get off of the things that are immediately bothering him, and so he can't focus on policy. He's not disciplined enough even to do what Kamala did, which was prepare for a week or so in a debate in order to organize her thinking and to answer questions in an appropriate, I think, statesman-like manner, in which, in that case, I think she did win. But what I wanted to also jump off Jonathan's concept of the government always looks at every economic interaction as a lose-win situation. Well, anytime force is introduced into any relationship, it's always going to be a win-lose situation, which is precisely what the government is. It's force. And if it's introduced into relationships like economic relationships, it is about asserting one party's will over another until that party defeats the other. There's always going to be a loser. And the government will never learn that. And I'm not sure that a population brought up on spoils system democracy who now gets pieces of the loot of the political, their particular politician that gets in office is going to be sensitive to what we're saying either, because they're profiting at other people's losses now as well.
So let me quickly get to a couple points in the chat, and then we'll go to the next clip. Akira says that episode is an absolute classic, Razi. That's in reference to the Daily Objective that Raka and I did. I think, Akira, you're the only person who thinks that, but I do appreciate it. And Supicast says Kamala is always looking at her opponent while Trump always looks away. Interesting. Look, if I was across the room from Kamala, I would also be looking away at the nearest exit. Yeah, I don't like her. I'm not going to be much help on this on this show. Luckily, I only have a few minutes left. Let's watch another clip and talk about
a new topic.
Do you have anything to add on this one?
No, let's keep the ball rolling.
All right.
First of all, they bought their chips from Taiwan. We hardly make chips anymore because of philosophies like they have and policies like they have. I don't say her because she has no policy. Everything that she believed 3 years ago and 4 years ago is out the window. She's going to my philosophy now. In fact, I was going to send her a MAGA hat. She's gone to my philosophy. But if she ever got elected, she'd change it. And it will be the end of our country. She's a Marxist. Everybody knows she's a Marxist. Her father's a Marxist professor in economics, and he taught her well. But when you look at what she's done to our country, and when you look at these millions and millions of people that are pouring into our country monthly, where it's, I believe, 21 million people, not the 15 that people say, and I think it's a lot higher than the 21. That's bigger than New York State pouring in. And just look at what they're doing to our country. They're criminals. Many of these people coming in are criminals. And that's bad for our economy, too. You know, you mentioned before, we'll talk about immigration later. Well, bad immigration is the worst thing that can happen to our economy. They have, and she has, destroyed our country with policy that's insane. Almost policy that you'd say they have to hate our country.
President Trump.
Right. So first of all, that's really pathetic when people on the right do it, and I'm even surprised, and I shouldn't be, that that Trump is doing that. Stop calling everybody on the left Marxists. You know, some of them are, but not everybody is, and you're making yourself look stupid when you say it. You know, there's so much bad things about her to criticize. If you were on the right side of those things, it would be easier for you to criticize it rather than call her this name that now the right is called. You know who's a Marxist? Your buddy, what's his face? Tucker Carlson. Tucker Carlson speaks in Marxist language, like proper Marxist language. So yeah, Trump, there are Marxists or Marx-like people on your side, and yeah, stop using that. Thank you, Bull Moose, for the super chat. Bull Moose says Trump loves to look at his audience because he believes they idolize him. If there was a mirror at the debate, he probably would have been staring at it. And Robert, thank you for the super chat. Robert says, meanwhile, if you need a spiritual palate cleanse after the debate, I encourage you all to check out Philosophy I Need It, Jonathan's Substack.
Thank you. Wow.
Jonathan, any comments on that latest bit we saw?
You know, it reminded me a little bit of what frustrates me so much about the right now. And you know, Ayn Rand Institute had a great comment, a great note about this a couple of years ago, which was that Trump doesn't advocate for capitalism. He can't advocate for capitalism. So it's whataboutism. You know, he's quick to, and Nikos, who said this on Twitter, was so spot on. I mean, you really demean the horror of Marxism to consider Kamala Harris Marxist. You know, it's like and it's an easy way to get people to like Marxism because they think, geez, a Marxism just kind of like, you know, a little more taxes for wealthy. I mean, it kind of underplays Marxism terribly. But Trump, like when asked about healthcare, for example, what's your plan? He doesn't say we need a free market in healthcare. We need a separation of government. And he doesn't say that because he doesn't believe in that. So that's what's so infuriating to me. It's so quick to say, oh, you're a Marxist, you're a Marxist. And they say, well, what are you? Are you a capitalist? No, I'm just a different form of a mixed economy. So, you know, that's what's so infuriating. They go around calling everyone a Marxist, but they don't defend capitalism because they don't believe in it. They're just a different form of a mixed economy bullshit.
So, guys, I do have to go. Daniel will be replacing me. That doesn't mean I stand by everything he says, but I probably agree with much of it. I just want to read a couple of comments before. Actually, one comment. Soupy Cask says, I will proudly, in all caps, be voting for Kamala Harris. Look, I understand people. I would not vote if I was a U.S. citizen, but I understand people who vote for Kamala. I understand people who vote for Trump. I don't understand people who do either of it proudly, certainly not proudly in all caps. These are bad people. And yeah, if you look enough at the other guy or gal, then the other one looks not as bad. But they are both very, very bad. So please don't do it. There's so much to be proud of in life. Voting for one of these two schmucks is not on that list of things to be proud of. And I will read Enric's super chat before I go. Thank you, Enric. Enric says, what has developed that's visible in politics is a lack of pride in the philosophical foundation of the USA, abandoning exceptionalism. That is a great comment for me to depart with, even though it's not mine. Unlike whatever Daniel's about to say, that I completely stand by. Thanks, guys. I will see you tomorrow, but this show
Peace.
continues.
Bye.
So I'm replacing Razi, and as he said, he does stand by everything I say. So with that, I think we can continue. One thing I wanted to mention is the idea of like trade deficit. And I was surprised to hear it from Kamala, because the idea of trade deficit was something that Trump pioneered a lot. The idea that we are losing to these countries. And that is literally like a 16th century concept. The fact that money is not created, wealth is not created, it's stolen. So the best thing you can do is get as much stuff out and get all the money in. So it's literally like a 16th century concept, and the fact that
He
it's
didn't
still
create
being
it, though. He didn't create it. He might have resurrected it, but it's been a concept in American politics for a long, long
Yeah,
time.
wasn't that Pat Buchanan thing even in the 90s vaguely? That was like that.
It's a definitely paleo-conservative, concept for sure.
Ignorant.
But I want to hear what Jonathan has to say about what the last commentary was.
I think I'm thinking about Millet, and he would have called her a collectivist, right? And that would have been exactly on point. But unfortunately, Trump is himself a collectivist, so he wouldn't be able to he wouldn't be able to understand what collectivism means. But wouldn't that be so nice if we had an American presidential candidate say what Millet was so accurate about? So yeah, they're both collectivists, and they're both awful. That should be the messaging. And she's clearly not a Marxist, as you guys pointed out, and she wants the collective over the individual.
and
Although,
Robert,
although I have to say there was a good line in there from Trump that did make me laugh a little bit, that she had no policy. She's reversing her policies. In fact, she's adopting Trump's policies. He thought about getting her a MAGA hat. That was a fairly decent swing, because she is pretending to be moderate. Whatever that means in American politics today is such a ridiculous concept. For us, for me, it's an anti-concept. It means nothing. But she is definitely trying to distance herself from the left side, which are collectivists, and attempting to appear to be more mixed, market-driven person than she is. But I agree, collectivist should be the term that should be slung around. That's the moral term that describes these people to a T. And Millet used it unreservedly and with conviction. And look what it did for him, and look what it looks like it's doing for Argentina.
we have a super chat from Robert who says, language matters. If we use Marxist and communist to describe Ms. Harris, what words will be left to use when the real communists come to power? And yeah, I think that builds on the point Mark made, because yeah, the moderators brought up this for both candidates. I think with Harris, it was the fact that she seemed to have changed her policy on fracking, and she basically came out as endorsing fracking and even supporting it now, which she didn't do in the past. And I think with Trump, it was obvious they brought up Obamacare, who he said he will appeal it, and now he basically is going to fight to preserve it. So I have a question for you guys. What do you think about this? Because I've been wondering about this, because if you are someone who wants to become a president, which was it 2020 with Harris, she had a certain policy she's going to support, but when she is actually the Democratic nominee, she has different policies. To me, this seems just like a fact of like being a politician. Like, you have to be popular, so you have to change your opinions based on what the people want. But I wonder what you guys think.
No, I think I mean that's certainly the way politics are now. We live in a spoils system democracy, and the politicians have. I mean, even before Rand was one of the first people to explicitly say how politicians have given up principles for pragmatism, and so they'll say whatever they think they need to say in order to win votes. I think if you were a politician in the sense as an objectivist would be, you'd state your principles openly and honestly, and you would stick by those principles openly and honestly, whether they were popular or not, because they're true and they're right. That's the way it should be. But of course, each politician plays to the crowd that they're trying to suck into voting for them. And so they'll say whatever is important to that crowd and give away values that they steal from someone else, or promise to give away values to whatever crowd it is they're playing to.
I do want to say that I think it's I found it kind of good to find them looking for, asking her about these contradictions. We're still expecting, to an extent, there's some remnants of us expecting the politicians to have consistency, and we challenged them with that. I think that was a good thing that we have left. Maybe in the next debate it wouldn't matter anymore, which I guess that's where we're heading in our post-truth era. And yeah, as I think the Peikoff acting principle is a wonderful example that shows why we need principle, why we need to be consistent, and we don't have any of that in our politics. We have absolutely zero, and there's not even truth. And Trump is one. He won on that, and challenging that. With all the fake news, there's no more truth. Who can tell what he says that he didn't do this, but they say, and he says he lies. She says he's a liar. Who knows? Who can tell now? And it's a very sad state of affairs in America. That's what they're teaching at the universities, that there's no, yeah.
But the one thing Trump has going for him is that I think most of the public perceives a double standard out there, a two-tiered system of justice. When they see Democrats, prominent Democrats and relatives of prominent Democrats doing the same thing, if not worse, than Trump did, and not being prosecuted at all or being fined a pittance for what they've done, they see that as a grave injustice, and that strengthens Trump's gravitas in the face of the electorate, because they see themselves in him. They see themselves as the next potential victim of this weaponization of the Department of Justice. And we can't deny, that the Department of Justice was weaponized against Trump, and their intention was to do the very thing that they're accusing Trump of doing, which is to interfere with the democratic process. They wanted to. This is the first time in American history that I'm aware of. Maybe somebody here is a little bit more of a historian than me can think of another time where the government used tons of its resources to target a political opponent and often to smear him with the complicit help of the media. I can't think of another time when there was with such a political disaster, and that's the one thing he's got working in his favor. But that's a powerful thing, and that influences a lot of people.
Jonathan?
The issue was that Vice President Harris has changed her position on a couple of issues. And I mean, it's something that Trump has done as well. But to bring us back to Ayn Rand for a moment, I'm reminded of a story that Dr. Peikoff told on the podcast about Ronald Reagan's campaign in the early 80s. And Peikoff tells the story, please, someone will find this if you search his archives, of Miss Rand asking him to call Reagan's campaign office to find out what his policy was on abortion. And as I recall, Reagan had been basically pro-choice, much more pro-choice as governor of California. Mark, you're shaking your head like maybe you remember this. And then when he ran for president, he embraced what at the time was coined the moral majority. And that was that very religious right-wing-ism that born everything from, opposition to Roe v. Wade to the labeling of music records, rap albums at the time. They called themselves the moral majority. And people are always surprised.
Just quickly, it became sort of right-wing-ism with him. It was the sort of like being anti-abortion wasn't really.
Yeah, but also he was a Democrat. So he took a hard right turn at some point in his political life and then became a Republican and embraced conservative values which became indistinguishable from religious values, really probably started under Goldwater, but definitely became a major component of the Republican Party under him.
And Rand did not vote for Reagan, spoke out against.
Yes.
So, I guess, switching issues is pretty important. There might be some heavy environmentalists who will not vote for Kamala Harris now because she's embraced fracking. If that's your issue, I guess, that's the hill you want to die on.
Yeah, but I don't know that she has embraced fracking. I don't know. You can't tell what's true or false with any of these people. I mean, everybody, Trump promised to drain the swamp got bigger. He promised to be, a conservative, and he spent more than any other president before him. And that's not necessarily including COVID spending.
Here, I would distinguish between, having a set policy and failing at something. If she says she will not ban fracking and she bans fracking, that's a clear violation of that. But if she says something, I will pass this, this law, or I will expand ACA. And she fails at it, I wouldn't necessarily call it as, she broke that policy, but she failed at doing it.
I felt like Trump attempted to deal with the ACA, and he was blocked by the Republicans in Congress.
Oh,
I mean,
come on, Mark. The moment where he was asked, okay, where's your plan? It's been 9 years. Think about
the plan should have been just a free market in medicine, and that's all he would have had to say.
He doesn't want that.
Republicans don't want that. They're always jumping over themselves to show how they're not going to cut Medicare, they're not going to cut Medicaid, they're not going to cut Social Security, all of those entitlement programs that are bankrupting us. They still want them to, and nobody has the political will or the balls to stand up and say those are evil and need to be slashed if we want to survive, if we want to thrive, if America wants to stay free and happy, then they're going to have to let these things go.
Yeah, but then again, you have to remember actual policy is needed. When Trump just says, I will cut this, I will destroy this. Well, what are you actually offering as an alternative? America has a healthcare problem that needs solving, and you don't see anything from coming out of Trump. And now he is not even standing behind, repealing ACA, which would be a start, but definitely not a solution in and of itself. But let's actually listen to more, just so we have something more to talk about. So I think I have a clip ready on a bit of Roe v. Wade. So let's listen to a bit of that.
His own body should not be made by the government.
Thank you, Vice President Harris.
Well, there she goes again. It's a lie. I'm not signing a ban, and there's no reason to sign a ban, because we've gotten what everybody wanted. Democrats, Republicans, and everybody else, and every legal scholar wanted it to be brought back into the states, and the states are voting. And it may take a little time, but for 52 years, this issue has torn our country apart, and they've wanted it back in the states. And I did something that nobody thought was possible. The states are now voting. What she says is an absolute lie. And as far as the abortion ban, no, I'm not in favor of abortion ban, but it doesn't matter, because this issue has now been taken over by the states.
Would you veto a national abortion ban if it came to your desk?
Well, I won't have to, because again, two things. Number one, she said she'll go back to Congress. She'll never get the vote. It's impossible for her to get the vote, especially now with the 50-50, and essentially 50-50 in both Senate and the House. She's not going to get the vote. She can't get the vote. She won't even come close to it. So it's just talk. You know what it reminds me of? When they said they're going to get student loans terminated, and it ended up being a total catastrophe. The student loans, and then I think probably her boss, if you call him a boss, he spends all his time on the beach. But look, her boss went out and said, we'll do it again. We'll do it a different way. And he went out, got rejected again by.
All right, let's focus on the Roe v. Wade. So it was surprising to hear Trump saying repealing of Roe v. Wade was this popular decision that everybody wanted. That's completely different to, from everything I've seen. And also, there is also a little bit of weird rhetoric, saying I repealed it. You appointed these judges and they've made many decisions I agree with, many decisions I agree with, many decisions which I'd say are wrong and are good, but sort of like taking this automatically. I'm wondering what you guys think. Let me start with Mark.
First of all, I think Kamala is right that a person's body is not the government's responsibility, and the government shouldn't be interfering with what a person does with their body. I wish they just extended that practical application of logic to all healthcare, because all healthcare should be a matter between an individual and his or her physician, and the government shouldn't be involved in it at all, unless, of course, there's fraud or some other form of force involved. Unfortunately, the left blanks out when it comes to that. I think that returning abortion to the states is a huge mistake on the part of Republicans. I think them touting it as a form of federalism is a mistake as well. I think this, like Rand, I believe, felt this as I do, that this is a fundamental concept of rights that needs to be settled once and for all in the Supreme Court, and there needs to be an umbrella law respecting it that I think all 50 states have to abide by, because it cuts to the very heart of what rights are when they begin, why we have them, and there needs to be a real philosophical discussion about that. There isn't one now, predominantly because of the interference of religion. So I don't think that Trump. Go ahead.
So
What?
offensive? Isn't this just so offensive? The notion that well, everything can be voted on. Abortion or not, everything is up to a vote.
Yeah.
Except for what a right is at all. Like, what about segregation? Should we kick that back for a vote for the states? Or, I mean, it's just get everything up for a vote. That I found so offensive. They always say Trump's transactional, and it's so true. For him, it's just about, hey, if you can get the votes, anything goes. It's so the opposite of what we talk about, what I believe Ms. Rand talks about in Textbook of Americanism. And, it should make anyone fearful of that notion of anything is up to a vote. And that's what a democracy is. Everything's
Exactly. That's the perverse nature of democracy. Rights, and ultimately your rights are up for vote and subject to majority will, and that's really, really scary.
Yeah, the fact that he won't have a position on this matter, yeah, it's so offensive, and a fundamental issue of individual rights is just up for grabs. Alabama can have it this way, Illinois can have it a different way. What does he stand for? Absolutely nothing. It's such an evil to ban abortions is one of the worst evils, and I'm so happy that in a country like Israel, it's such a non-issue. Everybody has nothing to say on that. One of the few positive things we have going for us, but yeah, it's horrible. It's disgusting. Why won't you have a position on that? Why won't you? If you're a leader, if you're an actual leader that unites the country, you expect him to have a view on individual rights.
I'll quickly mention, go check out Dr. Peikoff's essay, Abortion Rights Are Pro-Life, on his website. And it's a great opportunity to get that essay and a couple other essays. Ben Baer has been a great on this issue, but Dr. Peikoff's Abortion Rights Are Pro-Life, we'll put it in the chat here, on this most important issue, of which Ms. Rand was obviously very serious about.
We have a super chat from Roland, sorry. Thank you so much, who's saying, I'm adding 5 more francs to my super chat deficit with you guys. But anyway, keep up the good work. Yeah, that's a problem. We have a deficit with our viewers who are, sending us money, and and we have
I
a super chat.
I have trade deficits as well with my grocery store, with Amazon, and what can I do?
And we also have a super chat from Vadim. Thank you so much. So talking about Roe v. Wade, I actually remember, when it was repealed, I was in basically in a conference in America, and a few days after that, or maybe later that year, I was also in Austin, and I went to in Austin they have the whatever parliament thing they have in in Austin, and yeah, Texas was one of the states that had basically after the Roe v. Wade was overturned had pretty harsh abortion law, basically banning abortion. And yeah, just like sort of walking next to the building, and the fact that some people voted in that building, and from one day to the next one, suddenly, if you are a woman specifically, you suddenly have lost a certain right. It is very surreal, and the fact that it's so callous, well, let's just leave it to the state. This sort of like complete surrendering of actually having an opinion is yeah, it was very surreal.
Why rights are inalienable? Like they can't be taken away. So if the right can be taken away by a majority vote or kicked back to the state, and the answer is, oh well, just drive to another state then. I mean, what kind of rights are those? Rights like right by permission. It's not, it's life by permission.
So we have Mark leaving in just a bit, and I think the next clip is pretty long. We're gonna skip to the Israel part. We just don't have time to go over everything. So Mark, since you'll be probably leaving during the clip, anything you'd like to say, maybe specifically about the Israeli part, from what you remember?
Yeah, I don't really remember. She said that she would support their capacity to defend themselves or something like that.
Yeah, basically like.
But it was said in a super condescending way. I remember tweeting about it, that it was as if they had some form of control over Israel's right of self-defense. It was absurd. I don't think it. I'd have to see the exact words again to remember how bothered I was by it, but it's really none of our business. We really don't have a say-so in how Israel defends itself against a savage enemy. In fact, to the degree that we do, and to the degree that the international community is influencing the way Israel is defending itself, is costing Israel blood and economic life galore. This fight should have been over 10 months ago, and yet it still rages on because of Israel's commitment to altruist policies.
Okay, so let's hear from the actual candidates.
They threw him out. She got 0 votes. And when she ran, she was the first one to leave because she failed. And now she's running. I don't understand it, but I'm okay with it because
your time is
I think
up.
we're going to do very well.
We've got a lot more to get to.
Turning now to the Israel-Hamas war and the hostages who are still being held, Americans among them. Vice President Harris, in December, you said, quote, Israel has a right to defend itself, but you added, quote, it matters how, saying international humanitarian law must be respected. Israel must do more to protect innocent civilians. You said that 9 months ago. Now an estimated 40,000 Palestinians are dead. Nearly 100 hostages remain. Just last week, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said there's not a deal in the making. President Biden has not been able to break through the stalemate. How would you do it?
Well, let's understand how we got here. On October 7, Hamas, a terrorist organization, slaughtered 1,200 Israelis. Many of them young people who were simply attending a concert. Women were horribly raped. And so absolutely, I said then, I say now, Israel has a right to defend itself. We would. And how it does so matters. Because it is also true, far too many innocent Palestinians have been killed. Children, mothers. What we know is that this war must end. It must end immediately, and the way it will end is we need a ceasefire deal and we need the hostages out. And so we will continue to work around the clock on that. Work around the clock, also understanding that we must chart a course for a two-state solution.
Okay, I got to comment on that. Now that I've seen the whole thing again, I got to comment on it. It's all complete bullshit. There's no way that you can have a ceasefire with Hamas still in power. There's no way you can have a two-state solution with jihadist ideals still prominent in that culture, with the toxic Palestinian culture as it is. There's no possible way that can happen. The only way that a separate Arab-Palestinian state could happen is if they surrender unconditionally, which means they accept civilization again, they accept rights, they accept law, they accept justice, they accept persuasion and rule of law, and they reject jihadism. That is the only way they could be welcomed into the community of nations as a potential separate state. Until then, the only obligation of Israel is to wipe out Hamas. The fact that Hamas embeds itself within the Palestinian population, the fact that many are complicit and accomplices to the crimes of Hamas. Let's not forget that over 1,000 Palestinians poured over that fence, as well as Hamas fighters. They stole hostages. They bartered those hostages away to Hamas for money and status. Martyrdom and death is a sort of moral stature to the Palestinian community. There can be absolutely no ceasefire, no negotiation, no speaking to them until they come to the table with unconditional surrender and the return of the hostages that they've stolen. Anything else is nonsense. It's absolutely nonsense. It's her talking out of both sides of her mouth, attempting to appease the left wing of her party, who are rabid anti-Semites, openly, rabidly anti-Semites, and those people who are for Israel, who just want an end to the conflict. Yeah, we all want an end to the conflict because war is terrible. It's a terrible thing, but it was started by them, and it needs to be ended by the Israelis permanently. We've had ceasefire after ceasefire after ceasefire since 1947, and it only leads to more violence, because liberation is not what the Palestinians want. They want Arab hegemony. They want the Jewish state eliminated. They want Jews out of that area. They don't want a Jewish state. It's an anathema to them. And until they take the Jewish state as a fact that they cannot negotiate, there cannot be any other solution. And with that, I'm done. Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. Yeah. When I was listening to it, it's almost comical. She starts with saying, she believes Israel has a right to defend itself and she will support it, similar to how Antony Blinken talked on October 7th, that Israel won't have to defend itself as long as America exists, or won't have to defend itself alone as long as America exists. But yeah, I think she just hoped like the Israeli, the sort of like democratic Israeli supporters turned off the TV by that point and said, okay, now that they are gone, yeah, we want a ceasefire immediately. We are working around the clock. We've heard the similar thing, when we heard about the fact that Hamas has murdered 6 more hostages in Gaza right before the IDF was about to rescue them. We've heard the similar thing from Biden. Now that this happened, we will work even harder to secure a deal with Hamas. I mean, it is a complete capitulation, just on the daily objective. We've talked about 9/11 and October 7 and the sort of comparisons. And yeah, the fact that the West has given up on actually defending itself. But let's hear from Jonathan, are you in Israel right now, or are you traveling? Yeah.
Well, I'm actually in Tbilisi, Georgia now, hence the awful background, but which is a wonderful place, by the way. Yeah, what she says is contradictory. She says Israel has a right to defend itself, but Jonathan, you have a right to your life, but until you do something that pisses off the government, then you lose your right to your life. It's not a right, as you said, and as Rand says in New Textbook of Americanism, is that right is something you cannot take away. It's yours. It's inalienable. So if Israel has a right to its self-defense, there shouldn't be anything after this sentence. It should be Israel has a right to defend itself, period. That's it. And what it means in action, it means that Israel should do everything that's necessary for it to achieve peace, which is to annihilate the Palestinians and make sure they surrender unconditionally. So it's not, and she said, did you notice she said absolutely? No, it's not absolute. If it's an absolute, she wouldn't have said that. Then we need a ceasefire and all that. So it's absolutely disgusting. It's scary as an Israeli to hear that. That could be the next president. It could literally affect my life in a very dangerous way and people that I care for. That's why it's very annoying, and I'm very passionate about this. So yeah, Israel doesn't really have a right to defend itself, according to Kamala. And yeah, it's disgusting. What else can I say?
Yeah, and there is also a problem with the phrase Israel has a right to defend itself, because it's sort of like, well, you have a, right to own property. Like, if you want, you can like go out, you can work, and you can do this. So if Israel wants, it can go out and destroy Hamas. No, Israel has an obligation to its citizens to defend them. This is not something like if Israel wants, they can destroy Hamas. No, Israel has to destroy Hamas. So Israelis are actually, their rights are being upheld. And I think the fact that Israel has a right to defend itself, well, first, it became a meaningless phrase, but it's also wrong. Like, it is improper way of basically stating what needs to be done when it comes to this conflict. But Jonathan, what do you think about what Kamal has said?
Vice President Harris is, you watch her for a while, you realize she's really a master orator, and not in a good way, I think. As a veteran of many cable news chat shows, she can fill up a good 90 seconds with complete meaningless words. Oh, thank you, Dan. What's important is that stakeholders, shareholders work with clergy members, members of the community, faith-based leaders to come together. We all want what's best for the children. Blah, blah, blah. You're just killing up time. She's saying nothing. So she does a lot of that, just blah, 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 blah. And,
yeah, just quickly, it reminds me of that onion bit when there was like a Nigerian situation and no one knew like what it is about. So they were like, oh yeah, it's a very complex issue that has multifaceted problems. And I think we have to look at everything from different points of views. As
against, read Miss Rand's writing, listen to Dr. Peikoff's lectures, the efficacy of words, the simplicity of the concept in order to understand them. But I'll just say this, is that she starts off with the October 7th thing, almost like the stewardess on the plane who just reads the safety information that no one pays attention to. It's almost like a disclaimer. She has to say, well, I know that I have to mention that Israel was attacked and all these terrible murders went on, but let's get on to the real issue here, which is Israel's response. Disproportionate. We all really know that there's some compromise. The whole thing is set up as, well, Israel's done some bad things. Maybe Hamas has done some bad things. Let's just find something. I mean, I appreciate she mentioned bring the hostages out, but there's that same kind of moral equivalency. And Jonathan, to your point, moral equivalence, what more can you say? And equating savages with a first world modern democracy.
The fact that she mentions the hostages is embracing this narrative that victory for Israel is to return the hostages, and that is what victory is. And it's a very popular thing in Israel. She also appeals to a lot of Israelis by saying that, because that's what they go out to the streets. That's what they demand in these protests. They want us to surrender, to sacrifice, and we get the hostages back. So it's a very dangerous idea, and I won't even appreciate the fact that she says that, because it's the worst possible thing that we can do. Not that I yeah, what?
I'm sorry, please continue.
No, I'm saying just not that I wouldn't want the hostages to be back. Of course, it'll be great. But it will mean, if it means Israel's defeat, then we should absolutely not do that. It will be immoral.
Can we hear Vice or former President Trump's response? I know we're
let's quickly hear from him, and then we'll wrap up.
And in nation and
what's going on over never, and there was no if I were president, it would have never started. If I were president, Russia would have never, ever, I know Putin very well, he would have never, and there was no threat of it either, by the way, for 4 years, have gone into Ukraine and killed millions of people when you add it up, far worse than people understand what's going on over there. But when she mentions about Israel, all of a sudden, she hates Israel. She wouldn't even meet with Netanyahu when he went to Congress to make a very important speech. She refused to be there because she was at a sorority party of hers. She wanted to go to the sorority party. She hates Israel. If she's president, I believe that Israel will not exist within 2 years from now. And I've been pretty good at predictions, and I hope I'm wrong about that one. She hates Israel. At the same time, in her own way, She hates the Arab population because the whole place is going to get blown up. Arabs, Jewish people, Israel will be gone. It would have never happened. Iran was broke under Donald Trump. Now Iran has $300 billion because they took off all the sanctions that I had. Iran had no money for Hamas or Hezbollah or any of the 28 different spheres of terror. And they are spheres of terror, horrible terror. They had no money. It was a big story, and you know it. You covered it very well, actually. They had no money for terror.
So I think he continues talking about, Iran's funding of terrorism. And I think from that whole thing, that is one point that, it makes sense. The fact that I think what has happened is that there was some money basically going to Iran that was frozen, and basically Biden let it go through. And the fact that October happened later. But again, from this whole thing, that there was no real solution. He almost avoided like actually talking about anything. He just said this wouldn't have happened if he was in power, which I guess there's no way of knowing that.
Yeah,
but
Sinwar really cares about who's the president. That's how he planned October 7th. He was like, oh, it's Biden's the president. Okay, then now it's time to go murder 1,200 Jews.
And also stuff happened even during that time, even if not as big. There was the Great March of Return, so there was still like things coming out of Gaza. Not to mention the rockets were still coming out of Gaza, and all the West Bank terrorism. So again, just because there wasn't a big thing, but again, he didn't offer any solution. He did talk basically if Harris continues or becomes the president, that Israel would basically get destroyed. So sort of inducing, which is the only thing I can do, is that he would continue his support for Israel. But he also has been talking about basically striking a deal between Ukraine and Russia, and he mentioned something similar to Israel. So it wasn't really clear what his policy necessarily is on Israel.
Complete amoralism on both sides of this debate. Complete amoralism, and the primacy of consciousness that Trump exhibits is so ludicrous. Like everything has to do with him. Like everything that goes around the world, it only has to do with him. If only he was there, nothing bad would have. Everything would be great, all shiny and rainbows. And now because you have to get him back, so things will be normal. How? Unclear. He'll make a deal. He'll call Putin. He will call Sinwar and make everything shiny and happy. They don't talk about the evil of his radical Islam. They don't have anything to say about that. The evil of Palestinianism. They have absolutely nothing to say about that. Just that they would fix it, or worse, Kamala says we need to surrender. We need to give up.
Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, there's such delusions of grandeur. This would have never happened under me, and as to the claim that Israel won't exist if Vice President Harris is made president, I mean, Jonathan, you're there. I really would like to believe that Israel doesn't need Vice President Harris or any American's president's permission to act to obliterate its enemies. I wish they had it, but I don't believe that's necessarily true. The sanctions part is a real important one, and I remember covering that under, I guess it was Biden, although for some reason I feel like it was Obama gave back Iran quite a bit of money as well. But the fact that Trump has this beautiful relationship with Kim Jong-un, who wrote him all the love letters. I mean, he has no problem with embracing and sanctioning some of the worst MFers on earth.
Yeah, at some point he also talks about how great Orban is.
I wouldn't put it past him to say like, oh yeah, Sinwar is great. I love Sinwar. Sinwar and I have a great relationship. I mean, it would just be someone
he
else.
Loves his people. Sinwar loves his people. I bet we would hear that.
So, amoral is much worse than immoral in my book.
Yeah, Sinwar loves his people so much he cannot even be separated from them. He always needs to be hidden behind them. But so we are already completely out of time. So we have covered few issues. There's a lot to talk about. So, but any parting thoughts from you guys?
Jonathan, please.
Well, it's of course very depressing, very sad to see that this is future leadership of America. It makes me not be so excited for the American future. Hopefully they will both lose, but it won't happen. America loses, really. That's the biggest loser of this debate is America. And it's a real shame. And I hope through our work here at the Ayn Rand Center, our promotion of the right ideas, the right philosophy, we can hopefully change things for the next election at least. And as we grow, we're having more of an impact. I think that's the only way to change the course of history.
Well, I didn't think I would say that, but I hope one of them wins, since if not, it would mean a libertarian or green candidate would win instead. And, you know, for all the wars of Republicans and Democrats, I'd rather have one of them rather than the other guys.
Yeah.
Jonathan?
There's a quote by Ayn Rand that's in a new textbook of Americanism that is, elections are won every month of the year besides October. What does that mean? To Jonathan, to your point, it's the ideas that's where the elections are won, is changing people's ideas. And if you don't think it can happen, we've talked about the story of Martin Anderson, who was a student of Ayn Rand's, who ultimately went into Nixon's administration and got the draft repealed in America, which is an amazing achievement for freedom. Unbelievable when you think about it. I mean, historic. So ideas do move the world. What's so frustrating to me is that capitalism at debates like these often had one seat at the table. You know, there was lots of arguments in debates like this, but usually there was one seat at the table that capitalism had. And what really frightens and frustrates me is that there is no seat at the table for capitalism at all now in American politics. There's no even flimsy defense of capitalism. So, Jonathan, you're on the job. Ayn Rand UK Center UK is on the job. So you who support us, people like Tenbania Smith, who's a YouTube subscriber, Enric, El Rito, Bonnie Bertrand, you all are making us spread these ideas, helping us spread these ideas. So that's what we need to change the world. And thank you.
And let me also thank Regina for super chat, Daniel for his super chat, and Bonnie for a super chat, who says, for more ARCUK, a home for people like this panel. And with that, Jonathan, where can people find you?
Find the book, A New Textbook of Americanism, updates Ayn Rand's amazing 40s essay with all new content and just the basic essentials of what this country and what individual rights really is about. So it's at Amazon, A New Textbook of Americanism. And
Jonathan?
There's a link in the description to my Substack, philosophyIneeded.com. And by the way, the New Textbook for Americans has a wonderful Hebrew translation for the Israeli viewers, so you can also seek that one out.
I have it here, but we'll show it next time. Thanks, Jonathan. Great to be with you both.
And you can find me on my YouTube channel, Dan. And also Mark's and Raz's links are all in the description. So thank you guys for joining me today. Thank you everybody for watching, and bye-bye.
Thank you.